Chapter 83 Attackers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Yi said, finding supplies is a nightmare. I hit up every supermarket and mall around here. Turns out they'd already been picked clean. Nothing left. But I wasn't giving up. I knew you were all counting on me. To keep everyone fed, I was ready to search the whole city. I had to scour the city, and finally found this stuff in a mall. Zhang Yi handed the 2 bags to Uncle Yu, then opened the door for Zhou Qi and they headed down. He texted the group, telling everyone to come get their share. Soon, the neighbors swarmed in, the stairwell was packed. Everyone, skinny and hungry, stared at the bags in front of Zhang Yi, their eyes full of hope and greed. Some were already thinking about making a grab for it, but when they got a good look at the gun in Zhang Yi's hand, they thought twice. Zhang Yi grinned. I went to hell and back to get this stuff for you. He nodded to Zhou Qi, who unzipped the duffel bag and dumped its contents on the ground. Whomp! A pile of food landed in front of them, vegetables, meat, bread, crackers. Okay, so the quality wasn't exactly gourmet. Most of it was stuff dogs wouldn't have touched before, but now. These starving neighbors' eyes lit up like Christmas trees. Uncle Yu pumped his fist and yelled, "Long live Zhang Yi! Long live Zhang Yi!" The neighbors got the picture and joined in, shouting at the top of their lungs. Long live Zhang Yi! Long live Zhang Yi! Zhang Yi, you're our hero. Bro, you're my brother from another mother. I'm your ride or die. Right then, Zhang Yi could have told them to crawl on their bellies, and they would have done it. That's how powerful the lure of food was. Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning fought their way through the crowd. They looked rough, hair greasy, and all over the place, like a couple of escaped mental patients. Seeing all the food Zhang Yi brought back, Fang Yuqing waved her hands and yelled, "Zhang Yi, it's me, Qinger." Looking at Zhang Yi, she felt all warm and fuzzy inside. She was still convinced that Zhang Yi was head over heels for her, and even with Zhou Qi around, he was still carrying a torch. With this much food, he'd definitely give her extra. Lin Caning tagged along, begging, "Yuqing, we're BFFs. Ask Zhang Yi for extra food for me." Fang Yuqing gave Lin Caning a disgusted look and shoved her away. "Get lost, you skank!" The commotion made Zhang Yi frown. Someone immediately shouted, "Knock it off. Listen to Zhang Yi." Everyone glared at Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning, and they piped down real quick. Fang Yuqing muttered, "Why are you being so mean? Don't you know me and Zhang Yi go way back?" Zhang Yi, seeing that things had quieted down, said, "I went through a lot to find these supplies. I wanted to share them with everyone." His tone turned cold. "But these are desperate times. I'm not feeding freeloaders. If you eat this food, you're picking up a weapon and fighting. Anyone who eats but refuses to work will regret it, I guarantee." Looking at the gun in Zhang Yi's hand and the food on the ground, everyone nodded. They were down with Zhang Yi's good cop/bad cop routine. "Alright, let's divide it up." Zhang Yi was about to call out names when 2 arms reached in through the 4th-floor window. A few thugs from the Tianhe gang had broken in. When they saw all the food, their eyes nearly popped out of their heads. "Hey Zhao, look at all the food. Let's get it." One of the thugs shouted, excited. "What are we waiting for? Grab it!" The 4 thugs pulled out their weapons and charged at Zhang Yi. These guys were hardcore. They didn't care if there were dozens of people in front of them. They knew most of them were just sheep, too scared to fight back. Zhang Yi's eyes narrowed. Instinctively, he drew his weapon and aimed, but then, he changed his mind. Instead of firing, he backed up, shouting, "The food's yours. Don't let them take it. Anyone who takes one of them down gets enough food for 5 people." Hearing that, the neighbors who'd been ready to bolt stopped dead in their tracks. This food was from Zhang Yi. What would they eat if it got stolen? Food was life. No food meant death, right? And Zhang Yi said 1 kill meant food for 5. The neighbors looked around. There were dozens of them. What were they scared of? A few young guys gritted their teeth, pulled out pipes and kitchen knives, and charged. Everyone kept their weapons handy these days, which made things convenient. Zhang Yi, meanwhile, backed up, keeping his gun trained on the crowd to keep people from trying to grab the food. The 4 nThe gang members were caught by surprise. They figured these weaklings would freak out and run, but for some reason, they'd charged like they had nothing to lose. In a flash, it was a free-for-all. The 4th floor wasn't big. Dozens of people were crammed together, shovels and pipes and knives clanging. Everyone was desperate for food. And with the freezing temperatures, nobody felt much pain, even if they got hurt. Thwack. Thwack. Soon, blood started to fly, but even as they went down, they were swinging their weapons like crazy. Uncle Yu was the main guy. He swung an iron rod, roaring as he brought it down. The 4 thugs from the nThe gang were tough, but they couldn't hold back that many people. 10 seconds later, they were on the ground. Everyone was afraid they weren't dead yet, so they kept at it for a while. The air was filled with screams. It was an emotional release. They'd been living in fear, attacked by the nThe gang every day. Killing those 4 guys made them feel better. The fear of the nThe gang had lessened when it was over. 6 bodies lay on the floor. Besides the 4 gang members, 2 neighbors were dead too. They'd been hit in the head and neck with a shovel, and they bled out on the spot. Zhou Qiu frowned at the scene. As a surgeon, she knew the 2 men could be saved, but it would take a professional operating room, plus a lot of medicine and blood transfusions. But then, Zhou Qiu's expression went blank. They could be saved, but they wouldn't. Zhang Yi wasn't going to waste supplies on them. Chapter 84. Zhang Yi, don't raise waste. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Yi surveyed the neighbors, a satisfied glint in his eyes. Only after tasting blood did these neighbors become truly useful. Qualified cannon fodder, made it way easier to fend off attacks from other groups later on, and all it cost him was some stale snacks and empty promises. Alright. Zhang Yi clapped his hands, a grin spreading across his face. See? When we stick together, ain't nobody gonna mess with us. He gestured towards 2 young guys who'd really thrown themselves into it. You two, get over here. Beaming, they shuffled over, not even bothering to wipe the blood off their faces. Zhang Yi scooped up a big handful of food from the ground and shoved it into one guy's arms. Wasn't enough. He grabbed another handful. Stale bread, moldy crackers, wilted veggies, and a chunk of grayish zombie meat. Pure gold, as far as they were concerned. The other neighbors watched, drool practically dripping from their chins, wishing they were the ones holding that grub. Zhang Yi crammed the guys full, then clapped them on the shoulders. Keep this energy up, and I'll take care of you, you hear? The 2 young men were practically vibrating with excitement. This was enough food to last them for days. Tears welled up in their eyes. It had been way too long since they'd eaten anything resembling real food. Brother Zhang Yi, we're with you all the way. We'll work our tails off. We're your guys, whatever you say. Li Qingbin and Jiang Lei shouted, their voices cracking with emotion. Looking at Zhang Yi now, their eyes were filled with gratitude. The other neighbors, seeing a glimmer of hope, secretly regretted not putting in more effort. Zhang Yi had orchestrated the whole thing perfectly. After rewarding his top performers, he announced, alright, time to divvy up the rest. One at a time. He'd been keeping a close eye on everyone. The harder they worked, the bigger the share. Slackers. They'd get scraps. Most people got a piece of bread or a couple of tiny bags of crackers. Zhang Yi understood how to handle the crowd. Overfeed a dog and it gets lazy and disobedient. Best to keep it hungry, just a little bit, all the time, keeps them in line. Same went for people. The neighbors were disappointed with their meager portions, but they didn't dare complain. Zhang Yi had already set the example. If you weren't getting enough, it was your own damn fault for not hustling. Look at Li Qingbin and Jiang Lei. Stop blaming others and start looking at yourselves. Su Hao. Zhang Yi pointed at the 2nd-generation rich kid. Su Hao rushed forward, hands outstretched. Where's my grub? Zhang Yi shot him a disgusted look, nudged the ground with his boot, picked up a piece of hard candy, and tossed it into Su Hao's palm. That's yours. The other neighbors snickered. Even those who didn't get much felt a little better now. Hey, at least I got more than that guy. Su Hao must be really unlucky. Su Hao's eyes bulged, and a wave of humiliation washed over him. Are you kidding me? One piece of candy. That's it? He yelled. Zhang Yi sneered. You got the nerve to complain. You were lurking in the back the whole time. Didn't even lay a finger on those guys. I'm giving you that candy out of the kindness of my heart. Su Hao was sneaky, he'd shouted and waved a stick, yelling kill him. Kill him, but he made sure to stay well in the back, out of harm's way. He thought he could pull one over on Zhang Yi, but he was sorely mistaken. Su Hao sputtered, how's that my fault? They ganged up on those four. There was no room for me. Zhang Yi shrugged. Not my problem. I don't care about the how, just the results. Su Hao, fuming, shot back, it's not fair. You're totally targeting me. Zhang Yi chuckled. Fair? You gotta be joking. Who do you think you are, demanding fairness from me? You think I'm here to play nice? I'm telling you what to do, got it? Loser. Zhang Yi glanced at Li Qingbin and Jiang Lei. What do we do with folks who disobey orders and act like they're above the rules? Li Qingbin and Jiang Lei had become Zhang Yi's loyal attack dogs. Zhang Yi gave the word, and the two carefully set their food down, grabbed Su Hao, and started beating him senseless. Su Hao tried to argue at first, but one punch to the gut silenced him. Anyone looking for reason in this world was a fool, talking was useless, all he understood was a beating. After a long time, when Su Hao was almost dead, Zhang Yi told Li Qingbin and Jiang Lei to stop. Su Hao might be useless, but he could still hold a weapon and serve as cannon fodder. Zhang Yi pointed at Su Hao. This is what happens when you disobey the boss. Don't say I'm a tyrant. I'm a fair guy. If anyone here thinks I'm out of line, put your food down and walk away right now. I won't stop you. The neighbors exchanged glances, but nobody moved. Their food was their life. Zhang Yi nodded. Good, we all understand each other. He walked up to Su Hao. Beaten and battered, Su Hao curled up in a ball, but he was still clutching the candy, his only chance at survival. Zhang Yi's eyes were ice cold as he stomped down on Su Hao's hand. His heavy snow boots were brutal, skin peeled off the back of Su Hao's hand, blood gushing out. Arg! Su Hao screamed and dropped the candy. Zhang Yi kicked it away. I expect better behavior from you next time. I don't carry dead weight. After that show of power, everyone else was quiet as a mouse. They lined up obediently for their rations, not daring to raise a peep. Soon, Zhang Yi finished distributing the food, except for the few who got nothing. Chapter 85 Humiliating White Lotus. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Alright, everyone's got their supplies. Zhang Yi had Zhou Qiu stash the leftovers in his pack. Suddenly, a frantic voice cut through the crowd. Zhang Yi, wait. I haven't gotten mine yet. It was Fang Yuqing. She'd assumed Zhang Yi would give her special treatment and save the best stuff for her, but she'd waited and waited, and nothing came. Lin Caning, who was standing nearby, chimed in, equally anxious. Yeah, Zhang Yi, what about me? Did you forget about me too? Zhang Yi smirked at them. Nope, didn't forget you too. Their faces lit up, thinking he'd saved the best for last, just for them, but Zhang Yi's next words crushed their hopes. You're not getting any. Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning stared, stunned, like they couldn't believe what they were hearing. Lin Caning blurted out, what? Why not? Everyone else did. Fang Yuqing was completely floored. She pushed her way through the crowd to Zhang Yi, tears welling up in her eyes. Zhang Yi, are you kidding me, right? This isn't real. You wouldn't do this to me. Didn't you say you liked me? Zhang Yi crossed his arms, raising an eyebrow. I said I liked you. But, you didn't actually believe that, did you? I say that to tons of girls. We're just out to have some fun, know what I mean? Now I'm bored, so please don't bother me anymore. I already have a girlfriend, Zhang Yi said, pulling Zhou Qiu close. Zhou Qiu and Fang Yuqing were night and day. One was a top graduate from a prestigious university, a respected doctor at a major hospital, perfect in every way, looks, figure, and poise. The other was a small-time office worker, constantly flirting with guys, a regular at nightclubs and discos. Anyone could see who was the better choice. Plus, Fang Yuqing looked a mess right now, completely disheveled, while Zhou Qi had flawless makeup and stylish clothes. The two of them looked like an angel and a beggar. Fang Yuqing couldn't handle the blow. Zhang Yi had completely stomped on her most prized possessions, her looks and charm. Crying, she pointed at Zhang Yi. "No, this isn't true. You asked me to stay at your place not long ago. Why are you doing this?" Zhang Yi curled his lip. "What are you talking about? I was just messing with you. Look how ridiculous you look." Then he looked at Wang Min and Lin Caning. "Hey, did she tell you guys every day that I was into her? And that I was gonna let her in?" Wang Min and Lin Caning nodded quickly. "Yeah, this woman has no shame, she's a total fantasist. The dumbass doesn't know her own worth. She even screwed over my cousin. She deserves this." Zhang Yi was publicly humiliating Fang Yuqing, stripping her bare. Everyone looked at her with disgust. Fang Yuqing's face went white. Covering her ears, she pleaded, "No, stop it. Please, stop." Zhang Yi ignored her and kept going. "A woman like you thinks she's all that, trying to snag some rich guy. But little does she know, she's infamous among the rich kids in Tianhai City. Everyone knows you're a cheap lay that'll sleep with anyone for a few bucks." Zhang Yi looked at Su Hao. "Su Hao, tell them, what's her nickname?" Su Hao, curled up on the ground, spat out through clenched teeth, "Universal socket, public transit, Russian roulette." The place erupted in laughter. "Ha ha ha ha. I can't believe we have that kind of talent in our building. I used to have a crush on her, damn it. Looks like you could get lucky for a few $100. If I'd known that, I wouldn't have bothered trying so hard. What a shameless bitch." Fang Yuqing was drowning in the waves of ridicule and abuse. Even with her hands clamped over her ears, she couldn't block it out. "Ayowa!" She screamed like a madwoman and ran off. Zhang Yi pulled out a small bag of cookies and tossed it in front of Su Hao. "Good boy, that's your reward. Just like training a dog, you give them a treat when they're obedient." Su Hao's eyes shone with excitement. He hadn't expected to get food again. Even after getting the crap beat out of him, the hate he felt for Zhang Yi had significantly lessened. He actually thought Zhang Yi was fair. It was his fault for resisting Zhang Yi. "Thank you, Zhang Yi. I'll be good from now on." At that moment, Lin Caning stood up. "Zhang Yi, Fang Yuqing and I have beef, but I've never done anything to you, right? I even spoke up for you. Can I get some extra food?" Zhang Yi glanced at her. "Nope." Lin Caning flew off the handle. "Why not? You're the one who was chasing after her, not me." Zhang Yi looked at her seriously. "I just don't like you, and I don't want to give you any." "Got a problem with that?" Lin Caning was speechless. "You." Zhang Yi said, "I got this stuff back, and I can give it to whoever I want. If you don't like it, tough." "That's not fair," Lin Caning wailed. "Life isn't fair." Zhang Yi was too lazy to deal with her. Everyone else just watched Lin Caning with smug looks on their faces. Li Qingbin and Jiang Lei wisely dragged Lin Caning away so she wouldn't be an eyesore. With the supplies sorted, Zhang Yi said, "Next, let's talk about defense." Standing next to Uncle Yu, Xia Limei frowned and whispered in his ear, "Why didn't we get anything? You killed 2 of them. There are 11 of us, we deserve something." Uncle Yu said, "Zhang Yi won't forget about us. Just wait and see." Xia Limei shot him a disgruntled look, then glared at Zhang Yi, muttering something under her breath. Zhang Yi said, "Excluding the kids who can't walk, we have 47 people in the building. Taking myself, Zhou Kur, Uncle Yu, and Xia Limei out of the equation, that leaves 43 people. We'll divide into 6 groups, with 7 or 8 people in each group. We'll be on watch 24/7 to prevent attacks from other buildings. If you see anyone coming, bang on the stair railing or something metal to warn everyone. When people on other floors wake up, they'll do the same thing to alert the top floors. Zhang Yi put his hands in his pockets and said seriously, the reward system I mentioned still applies. If you kill an enemy, you get food for 5 people. If you don't kill anyone, you'll still get 1 portion of food each day if you're on duty. But others get to choose first, so I can't guarantee the size of the portion. With that, Zhang Yi turned to Uncle Yu. Uncle Yu, can you handle the arrangements? Uncle Yu nodded. Sure, no problem. Chapter 86 Big Sniper. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After Zhang Yi finished laying things out, the neighbors all looked down, weighing their options. Someone piped up, okay, Zhang Yi, I get why you and Zhou Ke are off duty. But why isn't Uncle Yu on duty? He's clearly the best fighter. Zhang Yi glared at him, each word measured. Because Uncle Yu is a key asset. He needs to rest up for the main event. Got it, that it was a flimsy excuse, but nobody dared argue. The truth was, Zhang Yi just wanted to keep Uncle Yu safe, the others would be on the front lines, holding off enemy attacks from other buildings. Basically, they were cannon fodder. Expendable, to put it nicely. Uncle Yu was skilled, decent, and Zhang Yi's best guy. He needed to be kept alive, ready to serve Zhang Yi down the road. Once the assignments were done, Zhang Yi sent the neighbors home, leaving only the duty crew near the 4th floor. If anyone wanted to hit their building, they'd have to get through the 4th floor, whether they dug a tunnel or climbed through a window. Sticking around meant they could spot intruders right away. Once everyone else was gone, Zhang Yi took Zhou Ke back inside. He wasn't about to turn his back on people he didn't trust. Alone, Xiaolime saw that Zhang Yi hadn't mentioned their family's food ration. Zhang Yi, she said, did you forget about our food? Zhang Yi looked up, a cold smile in his eyes. Uncle Yu quickly grabbed her arm. What are you saying? Xiaolime insisted, Brother Yu does the most work, but he's not getting anything. That's just. Zhang Yi cut her off. I brought back more supplies than you saw. The junk goes to others. I kept the good stuff. Uncle Yu, you can pick it up at my place later. Xiaolime's face brightened. I knew you wouldn't let his work go to waste. Uncle Yu rolled his eyes. I told you, Zhang Yi's a stand-up guy. Zhang Yi just smiled. Back in his apartment, Zhang Yi grabbed a box of instant noodles from his personal stash, left it by the door, and told Uncle Yu to come get it in 10. Inside, he ripped off his cold weather gear. Clang, star. The pan inside the leather jacket hit the floor. Zhou Ke picked it up, grinning. I doubt anyone's out there. You're being too careful. Zhang Yi smiled slightly. Won't need this anymore. He had something better now, police body armor, snug and safe. Back in his warm apartment, Zhang Yi felt a surge of contentment even in the cold weather gear. 70 below was brutal, especially riding the motorcycle. Zhang Yi pulled some food from his stash and set it on the table. Zhou Ke had been starving all day. Zhang Yi had snatched all the food before they left. He hadn't eaten, and neither had she. They sat down and dug in. Zhou Ke asked, what's it like out there? Zhang Yi shrugged. What do you think? Snowed in. The low-rises are buried. If this keeps up, even when the snow stops and the temperature rises, it'll take half a month for it to melt. Zhou Ke nodded. And winter's coming. It'll just get colder. Not our problem. Zhang Yi said, we need to worry about people now. People in the apocalypse are worse than demons. They finished eating, and Zhou Ke snuggled up to Zhang Yi, wrapping her arms around him. Zhang Yi glanced at her. What are you doing? Zhou Ke blushed. Staying warm. She wiggled, trying to get closer. Ever since Zhang Yi gave her the green light, she'd been all over him. Good thing Zhang Yi was young and strong. Most guys couldn't handle it. Zhang Yi grinned and slapped her butt. I don't have time for that. Go take a shower and go to bed. Zhou Ke winked and headed off to the bathroom. What distracts Zhang Yi from beauty? The same thing that distracts most guys, toys. Zhang Yi laid out the guns he'd grabbed today. He knew a little about guns. He'd been in a shooting club back in the city, and hit the range pretty often. Police guns were a step up from the black market stuff he used to buy. Zhang Yi tossed his old piece and loaded the 2 police pistols. The holsters and belts were a perfect fit. Then, he started figuring out the rifles and the sniper rifle. The shooting range back in the city had rifles, but no sniper rifles. Luckily, the internet still worked, and he found detailed instructions online. Can't believe the servers are still running. Those corporations must have some serious backup plans. Zhang Yi muttered. Most internet companies had gone under in the apocalypse. Most software was useless, but a few of the big companies were still online. Of course, the government was in on it too. Humanity hadn't given up, not yet. They were still trying to keep the flame alive. Zhang Yi ignored his thoughts and studied the gun manuals. He already knew the basics, didn't matter if he was accurate. He just needed to know how to load and shoot. Worst case, I can just scare people. That's good enough. Just showing a gun was a deterrent. Zhang Yi thought for a moment, loaded the rifles, put them on safe, and stashed them away. That way, he could grab one and start shooting if things went sideways, but he couldn't bring himself to put down the sniper rifle. Guns were a guy thing. A natural obsession. Zhang Yi raised the rifle and looked through the scope at the building across the way. He could see the window of the house across the street, 50 meters away, clear as day. He could even see the lock on the window. Gotta try this thing out. This is a real game changer. Zhang Yi grinned. He hated direct confrontations, hiding in the shadows, being sneaky, taking people out without them even knowing where the shot came from. That was the sweet spot. Chapter 87 The Revenge of the Trina Gang. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Yi had a blast scoping out the whole community with his sniper rifle. It was night, so the apartment buildings were dark since no one had power, but the snow outside was so bright, you could still see pretty well. Suddenly, Zhang Yi's eyes narrowed. He spotted 2 little black dots moving near the garage. Garage, huh? Looks like someone's after my snowmobile. He smirked. He'd made a show of putting the snowmobile in the garage earlier that day. Figures someone would sneak over at night. Too bad for them. It was a setup. A little later, Uncle Yu showed up. He saw a whole box of unopened instant noodles by the door and his eyes lit up. No way, this is from Baixiang. Zhang Yi, you're a lifesaver. That box would feed the 3 of them for a whole week. Uncle Yu was really touched that Zhang Yi would share his limited supplies. Little did he know, Zhang Yi had over 20,000 boxes of that stuff in his warehouse and he'd never even touched a single pack. Why would he, when he had gourmet meals cooked by top chefs? Uncle Yu grabbed the noodles, knocked on the door, and said, Zhang Yi, I'm taking the noodles. Thanks a bunch. Zhang Yi set down his rifle, came to the door, and said, Uncle Yu, no need to be so formal. He didn't care about the other residents, but Uncle Yu had to be protected and well-fed. That way, he'd be his top enforcer and human shield down the line. Not that Zhang Yi was heartless. He wouldn't let Uncle Yu die for him unless he absolutely had to. Uncle Yu scratched his head and chuckled. Don't pay any mind to what Xia Limei said to you today. She's got a big mouth. Zhang Yi lowered his gaze and smiled faintly. Come on, am I really gonna sweat what a woman says? I'm not that petty. But seriously, Uncle Yu, you really wanna raise another guy's kid? Zhang Yi's tone was carefully casual. He didn't like Xia Limei, but he didn't want to mess things up with Uncle Yu. So, he had to plant seeds of doubt little by little. Uncle Yu smiled. Hey, what choice do I have these days? I'm lucky to have a woman like that. Zhang Yi nodded. Yeah, you're right. Xia's a good woman, not bad looking, and can still have kids. I'm not saying anything bad. Just that you're selling yourself short, Uncle Yu. In this world, a strong fighter like you is worth a fortune. Seriously, you could probably land a celebrity now. Uncle Yu was pleased by the praise. You think I'm that good? Zhang Yi said. It's not like you haven't seen what's going on. All those pretty boys who can sing and dance. Useless. Can't even take care of themselves. It's guys like us who make women feel safe. Then, Zhang Yi changed the subject. But still, Xia is pretty great. You guys should get to work and give her a baby of your own someday. A man needs his own kids, you know. Raising someone else's is kinda awkward, Uncle Yu felt a twinge of discomfort. Zhang Yi's words had struck a chord. He did like Xiaolime. She had curves and knew what she was doing, which satisfied him, but the baby was a pain. Less than a year old, he was constantly woken up in the middle of the night, never getting any rest. If it was his own kid, maybe he wouldn't mind, but it was someone else's. People were selfish. He'd been feeling resentful for a while, but he'd just been bottling it up. Plus, Xiaolime had been constantly telling him, just treat her like your own daughter, and she'll respect you when she grows up. Over time, he'd actually started raising the kid like his own, but Zhang Yi's words had snapped him out of it, making him rethink everything. I'm not thinking about kids right now. Let's get settled first. Uncle Yu suppressed his unease and forced a smile. Right, I was just saying. Uncle Yu, don't take it seriously. I respect you and Xia a lot. I just want you guys to be happy. Uncle Yu nodded. Alright, I'm heading back. Hit me up if you need anything. After Uncle Yu left, Zhang Yi reloaded his sniper rifle and took it back to his private space. These guns were his secret weapons. A few minutes later, the shower stopped. Zhou Qier came out wrapped in a pink bath towel, her skin as white as milk. Her long, toned legs had elegant lines and glowed under the light. Zhang Yi lay on the sofa and said lazily, I'm beat today, you can make the first move. Zhou Qier looked at Zhang Yi on the sofa, hesitant. He'd been running around all day, and he must be sweaty, without even showering, but she didn't argue, kneeling obediently. That night, the Trina gang, down 4 members, launched another attack on Building 25. Their recent successes had made them overconfident, ignoring everyone except Zhang Yi in Unit 25, but this time, they were in for a surprise. The leader was Huang Tianfang's nephew, Huang Wei, and night raids were his specialty. Around 2 in the morning, he led 8 guys into Building 25, shrouded in darkness, but as soon as they reached the stairs, bricks rained down from above. Bang, bang, bang. The makeshift guards spotted the enemy and immediately fought back with whatever they had, armed with kitchen knives, sticks, and whatever else they could find. They blocked the Trina gang from above, raining down stones, bricks, and heavy objects to buy time. As they fought, they banged on the stairs and windows to make noise and alert the neighbors. Soon, the whole building was awake. Huang Wei and his crew, hungry for revenge and running low on supplies, launched a full-on assault, but they were outnumbered. Even if they were tough, they couldn't take on so many people, especially since Zhang Yi's reward meant each of their lives was worth food for 5 people. The neighbors were fighting tooth and nail. The battle only lasted a few minutes, but it was brutal. 3 bodies were left on the scene. Huang Wei and the others realized they were screwed and shouted, fall back, let's get out of here. As they ran, the neighbors from Building 25 gave chase, yelling and screaming. Before one slow worker could climb out of the window, a kitchen knife hit him in the butt, burying half the blade. He screamed and scrambled out with his butt sticking up. Once they were outside, the neighbors were too scared to chase them any further. It was late, and they didn't know what was out there, but Zhang Yi had been woken up by the commotion. He came to the balcony and looked at the fleeing Trina gang members below. A thought struck him. Could I pick them off with my sniper rifle from here? Chapter 175 Prophet. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Missiles filled the sky, each leaving a fiery trail as they screamed toward the figure standing above. Liang Yu watched, a flicker of pity in her eyes. They still didn't grasp who they were dealing with. Zhang Yi remained motionless. As the missiles hurtled closer, his expression stayed calm. Slowly, he raised a hand. Die! The pilots roared, enraged, but the expected explosion never came. The missiles didn't even get close to Zhang Yi, they simply vanished in midair. The last time, it had happened too fast to register. This time, they clearly saw the missiles disappear instantly, leaving no trace. Zhang Yi snapped his fingers, and suddenly, the missiles shot out of a dimensional portal. Re-entering the world, their courses had been altered. Now, they were heading straight for the fighter jets. Barada's top brass and the pilots themselves watched in horror. No, that they couldn't believe what they were seeing. They had never witnessed such an impossible ability, but the missiles were too fast. Even seeing them coming, they had no time to react. Just as the fighters were about to be destroyed, a golden light erupted from the distance. A strange feeling washed over Zhang Yi, and his left eye flared with light. The fighter jets and missiles seemed frozen. The golden light intensified, like a rising sun spreading across the sky. Zhang Yi turned and saw a man holding a golden umbrella, walking slowly toward them. He stood on 7 golden steps, draped in luxurious gold jewelry, but his upper body was bare, showing off his muscular physique. He was strikingly handsome, with classic high-caste features, sharp lines, and skin that seemed to glow. A smile played on his lips as he walked, the golden umbrella in his right hand rotating gently. The golden light emanated from the umbrella, shielding the fighter jets and stopping the missiles. Boom! 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 The missiles exploded one by one in the air, almost in slow motion. The explosions felt weak, almost powerless, but the resulting shockwaves slowly but surely began to engulf the city below. Time manipulation, Zhang Yi realized instantly. As a dual time and space ability user himself, he was acutely aware of others like him. At that moment, Yang Xinxin's voice reached his ears. "Brother, I know him. He's the leader of the 8 tribes of Bharata, the head of the Celestials, Indra." From the shadow space, Yang Xinxin could observe everything happening outside. She looked at Indra, a hint of concern in her eyes. "He also goes by Anand Sharma." Yang Xinxin knowing Indra wasn't a surprise. He was a global figure. She and Zhang Yi had previously discussed the possibility of special individuals existing long before the Great Mutation, talented individuals who awakened even before the end times, and those talents would be amplified in the apocalypse, like Ho-Tu, in Xingjing district. And this, Indra, was an even bigger deal. Before the end of the world, he was already a world-renowned prophet. Bharata's child prodigy, the most famous prophet of the 21st century, Anand, compared. To him, Ho-Tu was just a controversial figure with powers. Anand, as a prophet, had become famous at just 10 years old, accurately predicting numerous major world events. He even mentioned the global doomsday in a prophecy 10 years prior. Anand Sharma was undoubtedly the most famous person with special abilities on the planet. Prophecy, plus time manipulation. Interesting. Zhang Yi smiled, but his eyes turned serious. Indra, the most powerful alien in Bharata, and a rare time ability user, those titles warranted careful consideration. Indra continued walking slowly toward Zhang Yi on the golden steps, a smile on his face, but an emotionless smile, like a god looking down on mortals. He glanced at Zhang Yi, and Zhang Yi felt exposed. "I see," Indra said, then slowly extended his hand. "You shouldn't have come here. The sins you've committed today can only be repaid with your life." Zhang Yi's lips curled into a smile. "Oh, really? Sorry to disappoint you, but a lot of people want me dead. No one succeeded yet." Indra kept smiling. "Zhang Yi, do you think that just because you want to leave, no one in this world can stop you?" Hearing Indra say his name, Zhang Yi frowned slightly, but he just smiled and said nothing. Indra chuckled softly, twirling the golden umbrella as he continued his slow approach. "You come from nothing, a nobody. But you possess extraordinary power. However, that doesn't change the fact that you are a nobody. You're sensitive, insecure, cowardly, afraid. You use your space portal as a fortress, trapping yourself in a cage because you're afraid to face the world. You don't love anyone, you don't trust anyone. You're cold, selfish, arrogant. This newfound power has made you boastful, like a lottery winner who can't handle the money. That's why you're here. You have the power of time and space, so you thought you could come and go from Bharata as you please, safe and sound." Indra's voice was gentle, but his words made Zhang Yi's expression turn serious. Chapter 4:16 Two Heads Eat. You are listening at novelfull.audio. On the distant snowfield, Xiao Honglian and Wei Dinghai limped along with what was left of their routed troops. They were a mess. They'd come on like gangbusters, and now they were running like scalded dogs. Between them, the two families had barely 100 soldiers left. Even their tough-as-nails alien captains were down 5. This battle had practically cut their base's fighting forces in half. Wei Dinghai himself had taken a blade from Zhang Yi and was badly wounded. His anger only made it worse. The Shui worship cult, Xing Tian, those bastards betrayed us. Wei Dinghai pounded the car in frustration, but anger wasn't going to fix anything. They'd lost, plain and simple. They'd underestimated their opponent. They thought Zhang Yi was just a small-time operator with a dinky shelter. They didn't take Zhang Yi seriously, but once the bullets started flying, they realized how wrong they were. Zhang Yi's crew, with its firepower, defenses, and aliens, could easily go toe-to-toe with the old Xishan base. Plus, being on the defensive, they had the home field advantage, and they could hold their own even 2-on-1. Chaoyu and Yangqing bases got their asses handed to them because they underestimated the enemy, relying on their own assumptions instead of intel, so, they deserved to lose. If they'd known what they were up against, they might have brought their whole base down on Zhang Yi. Or, they could have tried to negotiate with Zhang Yi, carving up Xishan's leftovers in a more civilized way, but second-guessing was useless. They had to swallow the bitter pill of underestimation. Xiao Honglian and Wei Dinghai were riding in the same vehicle. In the scramble to escape, they'd lost most of their tanks and only managed to salvage 4. Hearing Wei Dinghai's rant, Xiao Honglian ground her teeth. She wasn't surprised that the Baishu church had stabbed them in the back, but what she couldn't figure out was why Qingpei base had helped Zhang Yi. If the Xing Tian Legion from Qingwei base had joined the fight, things would have been a lot different. After all, large-scale warfare was their specialty. Xing Tian, how much did Zhang Yi pay you to screw us over? That the more Xiao Honglian thought about it, the madder she got. She grabbed her satellite phone, ready to give Xing Tian a piece of her mind. But Wei Dinghai stopped her. Don't do anything rash. Huh, Xiao Honglian stared, not understanding. Wei Dinghai said, Xing Tian's guys didn't attack us. They were just sitting on the sidelines. So, I'm guessing they took Zhang Yi's money and stayed out of it. He spat, those guys are always playing it safe. If they can get paid without fighting, they're all for it. The big players were all old rivals, and Wei Dinghai knew Xing Tian's style. Xiao Honglian exploded, what about our agreement? He broke his word and cost us big time. What are we going to do about that? Wei Dinghai sighed. We're practically crippled. You think Xing Tian's going to listen to us? I'm just hoping he doesn't kick us when we're down. No sooner had he spoken than they heard a thunderous rumble. It sounded like an avalanche, or a stampede. Wei Dinghai and Xiao Honglian exchanged worried glances. They knew that sound. The Xing Tian Legion, their 4 cars were packed and slow. Xing Tian, at the head of 500 troops, cut them off. Ha 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 ha. Xing Tian, riding on the back of a demon dog, roared with laughter. Xiao Honglian, Wei Dinghai, what's the rush? Xiao Honglian and Wei Dinghai had no choice but to face the full force of the Xing Tian army. The Xing Tian army was riding high. They hadn't lifted a finger in the battle, watching from the sidelines, itching for a fight. They looked like a pack of hungry wolves. Xiao Honglian and Wei Dinghai's hearts sank. Another fight now, and they were dead. Xing Tian, you broke our agreement to attack Zhang Yi's shelter. What do you want? Xiao Honglian, her eyebrows furrowed, shouted at Xing Tian. Xing Tian smirked. You know what I want. You two are loaded, so you can afford a little toll, right? The people from the 2 bases seethed at Xing Tian's blatant extortion, but they were powerless. They were already beaten and couldn't afford another all-out war. Wei Dinghai said to Xing Tian, I don't get it. If you'd joined us in taking down Zhang Yi's shelter, we could have divided up the entire Xishan and Lujiang districts. Why didn't you help us? Did you know something about Zhang Yi? That was the question eating at Wei Dinghai. He had to know, even if he lost. Xiao Honglian stared at Xing Tian, wondering why he'd done it. Xing Tian crossed his arms. Simple. Qingpei base doesn't have your vehicles or energy, so we can't project power like you do. Even if I won the battle, I wouldn't be able to compete with you for territory. So, Zhang Yi promised me 10 tons of food, and I happily agreed. He spread his hands. He gave me 10 tons to do nothing. You wanted me to risk my neck for a maybe. What do you think I should choose? Wei Dinghai and Xiao Honglian were speechless. They had planned to do just that. Once Zhang Yi's shelter was taken, they'd use their superior mobility to grab the prime territory and resources. The snow-worshipping sect and the Qinpei base couldn't compete, but they hadn't expected Xing Tian to cut a deal with Zhang Yi. Xing Tian wasn't about to waste any more time. Okay, let's talk tolls. His smile grew wider. How much are you willing to pay to pass? Xiao Honglian and Wei Dinghai had no choice but to cough up a fortune in supplies for Xing Tian's permission to leave. Xing Tian was ecstatic. He hadn't fired a shot, and he'd made a killing. With the 2 big bases crippled, he was now the top dog in Tianhai City. Everyone thought I was a fool, but look who's laughing now. Xing Tian beamed. Chapter 4:17 Devourer. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After the war, Zhang Yi asked Zhou Qi to treat Liang Yu while everyone else rested in the living room, recovering. The warm, bright shelter was always a comfort, especially after a battle. Soft sofas and freshly ground coffee in this luxurious villa. Amazing, but soon, trouble came knocking. Xing Tian showed up, asking for the food Zhang Yi promised. Zhang Yi and the others were drained, physically and ability-wise. Still, Qingwei base couldn't possibly breach the shelter, so Zhang Yi calmly led his people out and handed over the remaining food to Xing Tian. Seeing Xing Tian's huge grin, Zhang Yi knew he'd just scored big. From now on, your Qinpei base is top dog in Tianhai City. Congrats. Zhang Yi told his old classmate. Xing Tian laughed. Wherever you go, you make a splash. No one will mess with you now. Seriously, I never expected you to be this powerful. Zhang Yi, you're the real deal. Xing Tian was genuinely impressed, repelling the joint attack of 2 bases with just a handful of people, costing them nearly half their troops. That kind of strength scared Xing Tian. You're inheriting the Xishan base territory. After that fight, Yangxing base and Chaoyu base are crippled. They might never recover. Xing Tian chuckled. Hey, we're old classmates, and I don't want any trouble with you. He wasn't about to repeat Xishan base's mistake. Zhang Yi smiled and nodded. Living in peace is the best outcome. Xing Tian was about to leave when he suddenly turned back. Oh, one more thing I should mention. You're a seriously powerful guy, even hooking up with the snow worship cult without telling me. But watch out for those guys. In times like these, there are always religions trying to take advantage of people. With no restrictions, who knows how far they'll go? Zhang Yi felt a chill thinking about those believers, screaming the snow god's name as they charged. Too many people unafraid of death would definitely be a problem. Even though Zhang Yi had a shelter and didn't need to worry directly, the thought of those people focusing on him made his skin crawl. I understand. Thanks for the warning. With that, Xing Tian hopped on his demon dog and led the Qinpei base legion away from the battlefield. Zhang Yi stared at the devastation outside the shelter, lost in thought. So many dead. Corpses everywhere, blood soaking the ground red. Barely any pure white snow left. The ice and snow defenses they'd spent so much time and effort building were over 70% destroyed. The brutality of war was undeniable. We'll clean this up later, Zhang Yi sighed, looking at the mountains of corpses. He didn't have time now. He went back inside and announced, the war is over. Only after Zhang Yi said it himself did everyone visibly relax. Lu Karen nudged Yang Xinxin, and they exchanged excited glances. Yang Mi was also exhausted from using her powers to make food, but Zhang Yi had already taken out a ton of food from his pocket dimension and filled a huge table, fresh food and top-shelf liquor, the works. After the battle, the joy of victory and survival made everyone's appetite explode. Even those who usually didn't drink were downing glasses of wine. Zhang Yi grabbed 2 beef burgers and a hot coffee and headed to the infirmary. Zhou Qi had just finished surgery on Liang Yu. Liang Yu's neck wound was nasty. Zhou Qi was shocked when she'd unwrapped it. She couldn't believe Liang Yu had fought for so long in that condition. Zhang Yi understood. Liang Yu had been running on pure revenge, that's why she'd collapsed immediately afterward. Zhang Yi handed the food to Zhou Qi. How's it going? Is Liang Yu's injury serious? Zhou Qi sipped her coffee. The wound was deep, but I stitched it up. She's an enhanced alien, so her body is better than normal, and she'll heal fast. She'll be fine. She glanced at Zhang Yi, a hint of jealousy in her voice. Being an alien is so great. They get all the advantages. Zhang Yi smiled. He knew Zhou Qi was still thinking about the ice soul he possessed. But Zhang Yi still wasn't entirely comfortable with all the mysteries of the snow worship sect. Isn't your medical skill more valuable than any superpower? Zhang Yi hugged her and smiled. We could lose a stranger, but we can't lose a doctor. Don't sell yourself short. You're crucial to us. Zhou Qi smiled, happy to be appreciated. Will we have peace after this? Zhou Qi asked. Zhang Yi thought for a moment. At least for a while. How long it lasts? Who knows? Yangxing base and Chaoyu base were badly hurt. They'd need to recover before they could come after Zhang Yi again. Honestly, their biggest worries weren't Zhang Yi, but the other two major players in Tianhai City, Qingpei base had come out on top. They hadn't lost any troops and had profited from everyone else's losses. The snow worship cult had taken heavy casualties, but their religious zeal meant they could attract followers quickly. As long as they weren't suppressed, the next phase would be a game among those forces. Zhang Yi's team, with its small numbers, would be feared but not considered a major competitor. Fewer people meant fewer resources needed. Zhou Qi rested her head on Zhang Yi's shoulder, but then she sat up and started massaging his back. She'd only done minor surgery, but Zhang Yi had fought a whole battle. Zhang Yi didn't argue, just lay on the bed and let her work the knots out. Just as Zhang Yi was drifting off, Liang Yu, still hooked up to nThe, slowly opened her eyes. The recovery rate of enhanced aliens was impressive. She saw Zhou Qi massaging Zhang Yi and couldn't help but roll her eyes. Hey, a little discretion, guys. I'm still lying here, seriously injured. Seeing Liang Yu awake, Zhou Qi blushed and nudged Zhang Yi to remind him. Zhang Yi smoothly rolled over. Keep going. Teacher Liang is awake. Zhou Qi hinted with her eyes. Oh. Already? Zhang Yi sat up. Liang Yu looked pale, and her neck was wrapped in a thick bandage. Zhang Yi, I need to tell you something. It was the first thing Liang Yu said to him. Zhou Qi smiled. I'll go grab a drink with the others. You two talk. Once Zhou Qi had left the ward, Zhang Yi asked, What's up? Liang Yu said, During the fight, I killed an alien. And then I absorbed their power. Since we're partners, I felt I needed to tell you. It might be important. Liang Yu had heard about this from the strangers at Shishan base, but this was the first time she tried it herself. The feeling of getting stronger was amazing, and she didn't want to hide anything from Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi raised his eyebrows. Okay, interesting. Not every alien could co-devour others. He was sure of that now. Neither Uncle Yu nor Fatty Su had that ability, but he, Hua Hua, and Ling Feng did. By now, he was starting to understand the reason. Maybe it had something to do with an alien's potential. He, Hua Hua, and Ling Feng all had clearly stronger abilities than Uncle Yu and Fatty Su. So Liang Yu having this ability made Zhang Yi happy. It meant Liang Yu had huge potential for growth. Congrats. That's awesome. Zhang Yi smiled. We've fought together, lived through this together, and we're close. You getting stronger is a win for all of us. Zhang Yi patted his thigh, thinking about something else. You killed a lot of people from Yangxing base, which I'm sure was satisfying. Are you feeling any better now? Liang Yu stared at the ceiling, slowly closing her eyes without answering. Zhang Yi smiled. No answer was the best answer. Liang Yu might not forget what happened, but time heals all wounds. Love that we've promised to each other or friendships as solid as stone. As time passes, it will gradually fade away and be forgotten. People always have to live in the present. Chapter 418 The Disappeared Corpse. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Snow worship cult headquarters. Yuan Kongye stood with her followers in the biting wind and snow, awaiting the triumphant return of their expedition. Dressed in a white holy robe, her young face seemed fragile, but her eyes were steely. This battle was crucial for the snow worship sect's future. Only by partnering with Zhang Yi to cripple the other major factions could they secure room to grow. If Zhang Yi hadn't held off the coalition's attack, they wouldn't have had a chance. Whether they scored a small victory or a major win, everything was on the line. In the distance, figures emerged from the swirling snow. Zhang Yi was leading the surviving half of their forces home. The believers grew anxious seeing their reduced numbers. This didn't look like a victory, but as Zhang Yi approached, a proud smile spread across his face. He bowed to Yuan Kongye, saluting, "Master, we have succeeded. With the snow god's blessing, we achieved a great victory. We severely damaged the thugs from Chaoyu Base and Yangqing Base, crippling them. They'll never threaten the snow worship sect again." A wave of excited cheers erupted. Tears streamed down faces as people embraced. The snow worship sect had suffered for too long. This was a historic victory. Yuan Kongye's eyes gleamed. She stepped forward and helped Zhang Yi up. "Thank you for your hard work, High Priest. The gods will remember your achievements." Zhang Yi looked up at her somberly. "But we also lost many devout believers, including 2 priests, Lin Fei and Meng Ziyuan." Lin Fei and Meng Ziyuan, once outsiders, had risen to become influential priests within the snow worship cult. They had died in battle. A gentle smile touched Yuan Kongye's lips. She clasped her hands to her chest, like a mother holding a child, and said, "They haven't left us, they're here with us now. I can feel their presence." Zhang Yi quickly responded, "May they find peace with the Lord." A subtle light flickered in Yuan Kongye's eyes, like a hidden current. "Now, nothing can stop our expansion. I want the glory of the snow god to fill every corner of Tianhai City. Then the whole country, and even the world. Let the snow god become the one true god, and let the snow worship cult reign forever." Every believer placed their right hand on their chest and looked skyward. "The glory of the snow worship sect will last forever." Their faith shone like a beacon, seemingly able to melt the icy despair of the apocalypse. They were determined to spread their faith across the land. The Battle of the 5 Armies had dramatically reshaped the power dynamics in Tianhai City. Chaoyu Base and Yangqing Base, having betrayed the snow worship sect, and Qingpei Base, had suffered severe blows. Fortunately, their headquarters had retained half its combat strength and essential resources. This prevented total destruction, but rebuilding their strength would take time. Recuperating and retraining elite warriors was crucial. However, the loss of so many gifted individuals hit them hardest. Ordinary soldiers could be replaced, but the emergence of a gifted individual was down to luck. They were forced to shrink their territory. Concentrating all forces at headquarters meant they couldn't even fully control their existing territory, let alone expand. And, to add insult to injury, more and more slaves began to flee. The snow worship cult's propaganda was effective. Its religious context gave those struggling to survive a glimmer of hope. They willingly embraced the snow worship cult. But Zhang Yi was no fool. He wasn't reckless enough to recruit people from Qingpei Base and Zhang Yi's territory. Instead, they preyed on the weak, striking a decisive blow against the territories of the 2 major bases. For now, that was the power structure of Tianhai City. Zhang Yi's performance in the first battle commanded respect. No one dared underestimate him again. This ushered in a period of peace for the sanctuary. Everyone recuperated well. The frontline fighters, who had sustained injuries, were recovering. Even Liang Yu, bandaged up, was moving around normally. Since the Battle of the 5 Armies, Liang Yu had changed. Her indecisiveness was gone, replaced by an aloof indifference. She was quiet, but she carried herself with a sense of detachment from worldly matters. Zhang Yi understood. He had been the same after his rebirth. People change rapidly after experiencing great joy or sorrow. The villas around the sanctuary had been leveled by artillery fire during the battle. Zhang Yi officially invited Uncle Yu and Fatty Su to move into the sanctuary. They had been through life and death situations together, building a level of trust. They were in this together, for better or worse. Besides, no one could guarantee there wouldn't be another war, so living together in the sanctuary was safer for everyone. Zhou Haimei was probably the happiest. As an aunt in her 40s, she still looked young and beautiful when she dressed up. Like older women, she liked being busy and couldn't sit still. Now that everyone lived together, she could cook with Yang Mi every day and invite the girls to play cards. The sound of mahjong filled the living room. It was noisy, but comforting. The sanctuary had a warm, welcoming atmosphere. Zhang Yi, Fatty Sue, and Uncle Yu played poker or video games together. There was plenty of power in the sanctuary. And the darkness outside had no effect. The lights shone brightly every day. The $1,000,000 lighting system was set to a warm, amber hue. When they were hungry, they could enjoy fresh food from the space. If they were thirsty, the climate-controlled wine cabinet held high-end red wine, authentic Prussian dark beer, and Zhou Kier's hand-ground cat poop coffee. It wasn't so much surviving the apocalypse as vacationing. The outside world was full of suffering, but inside was a haven of peace. Everyone enjoyed their hard-won happy life, and they had become a little lazy. They hadn't even bothered to clean up the damaged ice and snow defenses outside, nor did they care about the numerous corpses left by the warriors. What was the rush? The most powerful factions in Tianhai City had been defeated. Who would dare to attack without having a death wish? But a few days later, one morning, Zhang Yi stood by the window, wearing blue silk pajamas and slippers, gazing at the snowy landscape. Suddenly, he noticed something amiss. The heavy snow covered everything, and snowflakes continued to fall, sometimes large, sometimes small. Is something missing? Too clean. Zhang Yi frowned and thought for a moment, and suddenly realized what was wrong. Corpses. Why were the bodies gone? The Battle of the Five Armies had left thousands of corpses, but now there wasn't a single one in sight. Chapter 419. They left on their own. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Yi was freaked out. Where the heck did over 1,000 corpses suddenly vanish to? He was sure they were there yesterday afternoon. Could someone have taken care of it? Trying not to jump to conclusions, Zhang Yi grabbed his binoculars and scanned the area carefully, double-checking he wasn't seeing things, but after a thorough search, he confirmed it wasn't his eyes playing tricks, and the bodies weren't just buried in the snow and ice. Those corpses were really gone. A knot tightened in Zhang Yi's stomach. In this crazy post-apocalyptic world, there are so many unexplainable things. Even living creatures can mutate. Could corpses do the same? Zhang Yi took a deep breath to calm down. He put on his combat gear, prepped his weapons, opened the door, and headed downstairs. Yang Mi and Zhou Haimei were already busy making breakfast. They were chatting and laughing, and everything seemed normal. Apparently, they hadn't noticed anything weird outside. Judging by the ingredients in front of them, they were planning a breakfast of soy milk, zilongbao, soup dumplings, and some fancy side dishes. A typical Chinese breakfast spread. Zhang Yi walked over and said good morning. Yang Mi looked surprised. What are you doing up so early? Normally, unless there was a serious situation, Zhang Yi didn't surface until 9 or 10, not that he was just sleeping in, he was usually up late handling stuff. Hey, you heading out? Zhou Haimei glanced at Zhang Yi, noticing he was fully geared up. She wondered what he was up to. Just checking things out. Something's a little off outside. I'm gonna take a look. Zhang Yi glanced out the window and headed out the door without another word. The two women exchanged puzzled looks, a bit unnerved by Zhang Yi's serious face. Outside, gun in hand, Zhang Yi cautiously made his way toward the former battlefield. The area where the corpses had been stacked was now empty. The overnight snowfall covered a lot, but not all the traces. Thousands of bodies don't just disappear without leaving some kind of sign. As Zhang Yi got closer, he finally noticed something strange. Around the area, beneath the snow, he could faintly see tons of footprints, of all different sizes. There were so many footprints, it looked like an army had marched through, and they were all heading out of the area. Not in. A shiver ran down Zhang Yi's spine, like something cold and sinister was watching him from behind, making the hair on his neck stand up. He realized the truth. The corpses hadn't been stolen, they had gotten up and walked away. Whoosh! Zhang Yi spun around, but there was nothing behind him. His heart pounded in his chest, and he patted it a couple of times to calm himself down. Even Zhang Yi, a guy who'd killed countless people and faced death head-on, felt a creepy sense of fear because of this bizarre situation. He took a deep breath and told himself, what's to be afraid of? I've killed enough living people, what can some spooky stuff do to me? Gathering his courage, Zhang Yi started following the faint footprints in the snow. He saw that they were heading east, stretching as far as he could see, with no clue where the bodies were going. A bit spooked, Zhang Yi decided not to follow them alone. He went back to the shelter, took off his helmet, and gasped for air. Yang Mi and Zhou Haimei, clearly worried, peppered him with questions about what he'd found. Instead of telling them directly, Zhang Yi asked them to gather everyone together. The two followed his instructions. Everyone sat around the living room sofa in casual clothes. Seeing Zhang Yi in his full combat gear, they knew something was up. Zhang Yi said, "What I'm about to tell you might freak you out, so take a deep breath first." Hearing that, everyone got even more nervous, and followed his instructions. Then, Zhang Yi spoke slowly, trying to sound as calm as possible. "Last night, over 1,000 corpses outside the shelter disappeared. I checked the footprints, and it looks like they just walked away." Zhang Yi's tone was even, but after those words, the temperature in the room seemed to plummet. The women, especially, huddled together, eyes wide. "Zhang Yi, that's not funny. That's too creepy." Zhou Qir's face went pale, and she grabbed his arm. As a doctor, she was a hardcore materialist and didn't believe in any supernatural nonsense. Zhang Yi shook his head. "I didn't want to believe it either, but it's true. Go see for yourselves." Since no one had paid attention to the bodies that morning, everyone rushed to the windows. Sure enough, not a single body was in sight. How is this possible? Zhou Qir's eyes darted around in disbelief, her mind reeling. Fatty Sue gulped. "Boss, did you collect all the bodies and then just mess with us?" Everyone looked at Zhang Yi, hoping it was just a prank. Zhang Yi rolled his eyes. "Do I seem like I have that much free time?" His denial just made everyone even more scared. What the heck is going on? It's one thing if a few go missing, but thousands vanishing overnight? How? Since the perimeter cameras were all wrecked after the First World War, there was no way to review what happened, and if some force had moved the bodies, they'd need trucks, and it's impossible to move that many bodies without being spotted. While everyone else was panicking, Zhang Yi started to calm down. He shook off his initial shock. In this world of mutant creatures, nothing's really that weird anymore. It was probably the work of aliens or some kind of mutated creature. As the leader of the shelter, he needed to figure out what happened and make sure they didn't miss any vital information. "Everyone finish breakfast, and then everyone who can fight is coming with me to check this out. I found out where the footprints lead. We follow them, we'll find some clues." Everyone was a mix of scared and curious, and they desperately wanted answers, so they all agreed with Zhang Yi's plan. These days, Xishan and Lujiang districts were their territory. They needed to clear up any suspicious activity to prevent bigger problems down the road, so everyone scarfed down breakfast, and then Zhang Yi rallied the main fighting force, geared them up, and they set off in the direction of the footprints.